Ever since Gamera broke out of his icy tomb in 1965, the monster was destined for an uphill battle, constantly fighting against the perception of being a cheaper, less inspired knockoff of Godzilla. A perception that, at least in the beginning, wasn't necessarily wrong. Indeed, it is a known fact that Gamera was born out of Dai Studios' desire to create their own giant monster movie to compete with Godzilla, who at the time was enjoying a level of popularity their rival studio Toho was more than eager to capitalize on. Gamera was an explicit attempt on Dai's part to create their own Godzilla, and dip their toes into a genre that was near the tail end of what many consider to be the golden era. For that, the original film, Gamera the Giant Monster, is as standard a monster movie as you can get, containing all the elements you expect out of a kaiju film from that era. It's a competent enough film, but aside from a few surprises, isn't particularly memorable. Still, it was a major hit for Dai, which was more than enough reason to make sequels, and from 1965 to 1971, the studio pumped out 6 Gamera films, 1 film per year, each one cheaper and sillier than the last, until the franchise reached an all-new low when it desperately attempted to half-heartedly revive the series with Gamera Super Monster in 1980, a film that makes even the cheapest Godzilla film look masterful in comparison. All this is to say that all throughout the Showa era, Gamera was clearly the underdog to Godzilla, starring in a string of films that were cheaper and far less sophisticated than Godzilla's, especially when compared to that franchise's earlier entries, which set the standard for everything that came afterward, Gamera included. Simply look at the amount of the original Gamera films that have been skewered on Mystery Science Theater 3000, and you'll see why the Flying Turtle was considered the lesser monster for so long.
You know, guys, it just dawned on me how weird this film is, you know?
Yeah,
It's
really.
kind of goofy.
Eventually, both monsters would go into hibernation, but it wouldn't take long for Godzilla to make a comeback. The release of The Return of Godzilla in 1984 marked the beginning of an all-new Godzilla series, affectionately called the Heisei series, which would run its course throughout the late 80s and early 90s. The series made major advancements in the genre, moving Godzilla back into a darker direction while also showcasing the technological upgrades and filmmaking techniques that had developed over the last decade. However, it didn't take long for this new Godzilla series to begin stagnating under the weight of its own attempts at financial success. Godzilla vs. Biollante, arguably the most impressive of the Heisei films, both artistically and technically, wasn't as big a hit at the box office as Toho had hoped, and in an effort to steer the franchise back into a more financially secure position, they began falling back into the familiar, bringing back the most popular of Godzilla's enemies, which proved relatively successful. But in the process, the series stopped attempting to push new ground, content with churning out sequel after sequel, sequels that, while fine, even great in certain instances, lacked the dynamism that made the earlier entries like Biollante so compelling. By the time the Heisei series concluded with Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, the King of the Monsters once again seemed to have run his course, and once again it seemed time for him to take another extended vacation. It was at this time that Dai, seeing the success Toho was enjoying with their revival of their monster, decided it was time for their monster to make a comeback as well, and also, like his more popular counterpart, would do so by reining back the kid-friendly antics of old in favor of a darker, more realistic edge. To do this, they hired Shusuke Kaneko to direct, a massive fan of the kaiju genre who took the job enthusiastically, seeing it as an opportunity to put his own personal stamp on the genre. And the rest, as they say, is history. Throughout the last half of the 90s, Kaneko would direct 3 Gamera films, creating what would come to be called the Heisei Gamera Trilogy, a trilogy that is now hailed to be a crowning jewel of the genre. Under the sharp direction of Kaneko, these 3 films went on to do all the things the Heisei Godzilla films couldn't be bothered to do. While the latter was content with indulging in cliches, fan service, and stock character archetypes, Kaneko's Gamera films embellished in intricate world building, thought-provoking ideas, and empathetic, sometimes even complex human characters. Indeed, while the Heisei Godzilla films often struggled with balancing a well-told human story with spectacle, the Gamera trilogy blends it all into a cohesive whole. The human drama and monster action work together to tell a genuinely compelling narrative that even those who don't usually take to monster movies may find themselves invested in. Characters are archetypal but extremely likable, and unlike most of the Heisei Godzilla films, are given more to do other than stand around and watch the monsters fight. The trilogy benefits immensely from screenwriter Kazunori Ito, whose experience working on Ghost in the the shell lends the films a more sophisticated anime-esque style of storytelling. Dabbling as much in spiritualism as they do in hard science, the films touch upon many of the time-worn themes of the genre, but without talking down to the audience in the way so many of the Godzilla films tended to do. Revenge of Iris in particular has layers to it that require multiple viewings to truly grasp fully. On top of good storytelling, the Gamera Trilogy is a technical marvel that put everything Godzilla was doing at the time to shame, within a fraction of those films' budgets, no less. And under the watchful eye of special effects director Shinji Higuchi, the films would end up showcasing just how effective suitmation and model work could be when framed and lit in cinematic ways. Compared to the Heisei Godzilla films, which were content in filming the monsters using flat, static wide shots, Kaneko and Higuchi used every trick in the book to make every shot look as good as possible. Low angles and proper lighting were used to convey the size of the creatures, making them look genuinely large amidst the highly detailed models of cityscapes and countrysides. Monsters such as Legion are marvels of suitmation, large and imposing and intricately designed and brought to life in ways similar monsters such as Destroya simply aren't. And while the monster fights of the Heisei Godzilla films are noticeably slow and awkward, and often devolved into spamming beam attacks, the monster fights in the Gamera Trilogy are simple but thrilling in their brutality, which contributes wonderfully to Kaneko's realistic approach while also remaining faithful to the bloody style of the older films. And unlike the Heisei Godzilla films, which were more than happy to lighten things up now and again, the Gamera Trilogy only gets darker, culminating in an end that leaves the viewer desperate for some light at the end of the tunnel. It's a remarkably dramatic turn from the days where Gamera was doing backflips to the cheers of children. In fact, it's hard to think of another fictional character that has performed as drastic a 180 as Gamera did in the 90s. This character was once a laughingstock to anyone under the age of 10, but now suddenly with these three films, the monster could be taken as seriously as any other, if not more, to the point where now he's looked at almost as fondly as Godzilla. People are clamoring for more Gamera, especially following the release of the 50th anniversary short film in 2015, an astoundingly impressive work that shows just how effective this monster can be under the right hands. The Heisei Gamera Trilogy is an amazing work of art, not just because of the skill with which it accomplishes its vision, but also because it's one of the best comeback stories in cinema history. In a short time, what was once considered disposable garbage for children was now considered the best the genre has to offer. And in accomplishing this massive feat, Gamera, who was long looked upon as a low-grade Godzilla clone, managed to, for a time at least, beat the king of the monsters at his own game and take the crown for himself. And while Gamera's reign was short, the trilogy continues to be looked upon fondly and remains the gold standard of the kaiju genre, a standard that only a select few Godzilla films, both past and present, have ever exceeded. They are a testament to how craftsmanship and vision can make up for a small budget, demonstrating how any idea, even something as silly as a giant fire-breathing flying turtle, can be great with the right people in charge. And as fans wait with bated breath for his return, they'll continue to watch this magnificent trilogy again and again and again.